Good evening, everyone. This is Dr. Amber Wheatley-Buckell here. I hope everyone is having a lovely evening.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for calling in, and you're quite brave. We've been trying to get a number of youngsters to call in and give the submittal. So what we've done, as you may have well heard, is that we give an introduction that we had a number of terms and conditions that were approved to be examined by the Constitution Review Commission. We have looked at a number of these through the last, almost 2 months, and we had a 40-day countdown so that we can then get the views of everyone. We have come to agreement, so to speak, of the first submission, and we also have 2 or 3 other areas that you may well outline because you have been able to meet with a number of individuals who have expressed their views. So we want to have you join in and share with us any points you may have, whether it's on the submission or any of the other areas that have been given to the Constitution Review Commission for exploration. So please go ahead.
Okay, so what I'll do is I will talk a little bit about the group that you mentioned, and then we'll get into some of the points that came up in the group. So when I attended the first community meeting on Virgin Gorda, I sort of realized that a lot of the complaints people were bringing to the commission, while they were very relevant and very important for the development of our community and our country at large, they didn't have a whole lot to do with the actual Constitution. And oftentimes when people were posed with the question of, okay, well, how can the Constitution help with whatever issue you're having, they weren't really able to articulate what it was that they really wanted. And what I felt was a lot of it was because the Constitution perhaps was not approachable to people. They didn't find it very enjoyable to read, and so they weren't reading it, and then they weren't able to actually discuss their issues within the framework of amending the Constitution. So I decided to create a little group, just to, throw a net and see what I would catch, posted on Facebook and said, okay, we're going to meet together once a week. We'll read through the Constitution, and ultimately we were working through the worksheet that you have where the salient points were highlighted. What I found is that not many people came to the group, so I think the most we had was maybe 5 people, including my mom. But the group that we had was really good in terms of helping us understand the legalese of the Constitution, helping people to discuss some of the issues that they were having with the Constitution, and hearing different points of view. So last night was our last meeting, and one of the topics that gave quite a good discussion was the question about whether or not we should reduce the number of at-large seats and replace them instead with a district representative for Anegada and Jost Van Dyke. Now, the position that I had was, relating back to what the chairperson for the commission said about having an elected representative for a district not necessarily meaning any practical change. I understood that, but having a district representative in terms of the morale and the spirit of the people of a community would actually have a much more profound effect, regardless of any change in the actual policy. One of the participants of our group was saying that, yes, I see how that could be very, impactful for people, having a district representative, especially in communities like Anegada and Jost Van Dyke that feel that they have been ignored for a very long time. But at the end of the day, it's not actually going to change anything. They'll still have to wait on getting word from the House of Assembly before they do anything. They have to have budgets approved the same as everyone else. So it was great having that lively discussion and also having different points of view within the group. One thing I really liked about our group is that we had lots of different ages. So there are some things that have happened in the political history of the BVI that would have been before my generation. And it was nice hearing what has happened, what people have tried, what's worked, what hasn't worked, but agreeing that we all want to go to a specific direction, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Yes, most certainly it does. And what we will have to look is, since it was used as a worksheet, I'd just like to bring everyone up to speed where it comes to the 4 at large. 1995, I think, was the first time that we had implemented the 4 at-large regime based on a interim amendment to the Constitution that was brought about in 1993. Now, in the 2007 Constitution, it made allowance for a 6th ministry, but in order for us to have that, we had to change. If we went that route, we'll have to add another 2 seats in order to actually maintain the balance so that the back bench was proportionately represented to the front bench. So there were 2 seats that are now being allowed. Every time you were to add a ministry, then you'll have to adjust the number of seats total in the House of Assembly. So there are provisions that exist today as it relates to the seats that would be allowed. Now, it did not specify in the 2007 Constitution as to whether or not it would be district seats or at-large seats. So a decision could be made or based on a referendum or whatever mean as to whether or not those 2 additional seats would have been district seats or territorial at-large seats. Now, there are those who advocate for both, so to speak. But the new term and which you have brought up and which is on the worksheet is where if you are to maintain the 13 seats that you have, then we can then see whether or not this new constitution would be prepared to reduce the number of at-large seats from 4 to 2. And whereas the remaining 2 seats would then be converted to district seats, allowing Anegada and allowing Jost Van Dyke to become their particular own districts. So this is what we're talking about, and I think that it wasn't crystallized in a form of a submission because further input from Jost Van Dyke, from Anegada, from Virgin Gorda, from Territorial need to be put into this, and the legislators will have to be brought to bear. So I think it is a good item to put in the form of a resolution so that it could be debated by this 4th House of Assembly, because by the time elections are done in the Virgin Islands, it will be the 5th House of Assembly. So the record as to what position the 4th House holds on it should be crystallized in the House. So I think that it will be a very good debate to have so that the people in Anegada and the people in Jost Van Dyke and the people throughout the Virgin Islands could then see what position the 4th House of Assembly holds on it. Now, you are saying that your group, they hold a position that we don't need to increase the size of the House of Assembly any further, that we should reduce the number of at-large from 4 to 2, and then the other 2 seats could be made into districts number 10 and 11. Am I saying that correctly?
So we actually had a split of the group. Some people agreed with that position, and others felt that essentially because of the size of the community and Anegada and Jost Van Dyke, we should leave the structure as it is at the moment, keeping the 4 at-large candidates.
Okay, and not adding a 14th and 15th seat?
That's right.
Okay, fine. So as is, 15, or reducing the 4 to the 2 and adding 2 other districts. Okay, so this is what we have to crystallize, because before we can call it a submission, we'll have to come to some agreement. So we would love to hear from Jost Van Dyke about this. We'll also would like to hear from other folks within the territory as to their feeling or thoughts on this, because once we represent it to the people of the Virgin Islands, we want to make sure that it is coming from the heart and soul of the Virgin Islands. Okay, thank you very much. Any other salient point on that?
I just wanted to add one thing. So for those of you who don't know my day job, I'm a family physician, and I specialize in rural and remote health specifically. So one of the things that I am really interested in is what's called rural proofing of policies. Oftentimes we have policies made or topics like this debated, but it's done from the point of view of somewhat of an urban mindset. One of the critiques that we had about when we were talking about it with the group was about the size of the population in Anegada and Jost Van Dyke, and as I mentioned before, would it actually make any difference? I think when you look at the people of the BVI, it's not just about practicality, not about seeing any visible changes in terms of having better roads, etc. But it's also about the morale of the people, how they view themselves, how they view the future. When you have a representative who who is in your community, who is experiencing exactly the same thing that you are experiencing, it does change the way you view your community, and you can have a lot more of a positive impact. I also think that when you have these communities that feel really isolated, showing that you want to empower them, want to give them a voice, not by visiting them more frequently, but by actually putting something in place where they have something on their doorstep, so to speak. I think that fits in with the rural proofing, where you're like, okay, whatever policy we think of, whatever debate we have, we know that we have somebody who is closer to the ground, who can make sure that what we're trying to do actually works in that community. That's the importance of having a district representative for me. It's not just about having power and money to do whatever you feel like, but also keeping in mind that we are a country made up of several different islands. Yes, they're not far apart, but they're still a distance to get to. There's still some effort to get to them. And having a district representative there, I think will definitely have a lasting impact, not just on this current community, but for generations to come in the future. And as I mentioned in the group last night, the good thing about life is you can try something, and if it doesn't work, then you can try something else.
Well, that is very good. And I deliberately did not interrupt you there because that seems like a good section that you will hear again, because it represents the feeling very well. I would go back because in the submission, we looked at our history, and we look at some of the reasons that we were able to advance our Constitution, because in the 40s until 1950, we were administered from the Leeward Island group in, I think it was Antigua or St. Kitts. We felt that although the UK and although the other islands were saying our population was too small for our own administration, we felt different, and we broke away from that. When the West Indies Federation fell apart again in 1962, or disbanded, fall apart might not be a correct word, disbanded in 1962, the offer was that our population being around 10,000 at the time was too small to have our own representation. And we said, okay, fine. We just fought to break away from that type of thinking, and here you are offering us the very same thing. No, thank you. We will not join the Federation. We would look in terms of developing our own particular government structure, and we would look in terms of what advancements we would have in the next few years. What did we do? We went through and we got our tourism sector started. We got the U.S. dollar as, agreed as a legal tender. We had our particular craftsmen and women go to build other industries, build other lands, and repatriated their monies at home. So all of this grew out of the fact that others may have seen that we were too small a population to have our own governance. So if we fought for ourselves back then, how can we fight against another area because we feel that the 300 population on each of them are too small? It does not go to figure, because you have outlined it well. I cannot say it any better than that. So I would make sure that I extract that clip so that we can then have the particular, be a part of the submission that we would make. And I think if you were to reduce that to writing, it would be a brilliant part of the submission when we make it as to why this should happen. Whether it is the 4 being reduced to 2, or the 2 additional making it from 13 to 15, we must be able to support this provision. And we want the people in Jost Van Dyke and the people in Anegada to call in, get someone who can lend voice to what we're saying, so that it will be coming directly from the 2 areas that will become 2 additional districts, so to speak.